It was a bright, sunny day. A young boy named Ammar was sitting quietly in his room. Syria was quiet, but the arguments from his parents consumed his thoughts. Risha, his brother, entered the room. Attempting to distract Ammar, he offered to take him on a walk. Ammar ignored his offer and quickly responded, "Why is the government so bad to Mom and Dad?" Risha dropped his head. "Money is tight. Finding jobs is difficult right now, but they'll find a way eventually. Now, let's go on a walk." As the boys walk through their neighborhood, Risha heads towards his group of friends. Ammar continues walking, eventually heading into the Hurrian Hymn, one of Syria's most popular theaters. He often finds himself here, lost in his thoughts, surrounding himself with complete silence. Time passes and Ammar decides to head back home. On his way, he hears quiet whispers and laughter not too far away. When he walks toward the sound, he can see Risha, spray painting on the school wall. The people want the fall of the regime. Ammar stands in utter shock when sirens begin to sound. That night, Ammar's home felt different. For the first time, his house was overcome with silence, and Risha wasn't there to experience it.
Tensions are rising, starting with the harsh crackdown on protesters opposed to the regime and Assad's rule. Continuing to protest as he is still impacted by what happened to his brother a few months prior, Ammar is stuck in the middle of one of these crackdowns. Ammar is now in a group of hundreds of people protesting the kidnapping, torture, and death of his older brother. What kind of government murders children for something as simple as a picture? The city is outraged due to this lack of humanity, and justice is demanding to be served. Thoughts and emotions are racing through Ammar's head.
Assad, the current leader of the country's government, finally decided to give up on his people. He lifted the 48-year-old state of emergency and let his people do as they please. Days went on, and changes were apparent. Terroristic attacks began taking place, and it started with the government. On December 23rd, Ammar was walking outside on his way home from school. An old newspaper was lying on the ground, and it caught Ammar's eye. Such negative words filled the pages. Violence and death rates were continuing to rise, all surrounding his hometown. His reading paused when he heard his friend call out his name. Offering a ride home, Ammar responded, "It's all right, the fresh air is good for me." When he turned to continue walking, he was thrown to the ground as a blanket of heat flushed over his skin. His eyes filled with tears, and clouds of smoke masked the sky. Parents were screaming out for help as their dying children bled out in their arms. Ammar was beginning to lose touch with reality. His eyes slowly shut, and everything went to black. Days have passed, but the loss from the bombings will never fade. Talk of fatalities were floating throughout the town. 44 were dead, and the injured were still being added up. Ammar would have never imagined that such a life-changing event would lead into something much bigger.
It has been 3 long years, and rather than coming to an end, the war is getting progressively worse. ISIS took attention to the Syrian war and how easy weapons were accessed and the power they could obtain. Not too long after their thoughts were public, the war was flipped upside down. Ammar became more fearful and questioned him and his mother's safety since his father went to find work and has failed to come back. As these thoughts flowed through Ammar's head, screaming and loud bangs come from outside his once quiet house. The moment Ammar runs towards the window to peer through it and figure out who is responsible for the noise, the front door is forced open and broken off its weak hinges. Around 5 or 6 armed men with stale expressions on their faces pile into the small home. They force Ammar and his mother to line up against the wall in a straight line, and to put shaky panic above their heads. One of the men, who is presumably the leader of this particular raid, approaches Ammar's mother, who is first in line. The second he opened his mouth, Ammar knew what was happening. They would either join the men and become part of ISIS, or they would be killed. They hold Ammar's mother at gunpoint and force her on her knees. As they directed her to praise Allah, she refused, and the last thing present in Ammar's head is the fatal shot that officially broke the ties between nightmare and reality.
Ammar has faced extreme loss, the murder of both his mother and brother. His father has disappeared in search for work, trying his best to make ends meet. The house is empty, the streets are cleared of any wanders. Soldiers patrol neighborhoods, and the constant sound of bullets firing seems to ring in Ammar's head. His nights are filled with visions of his mother falling to the floor as an ISIS soldier pulled the trigger. Each night he sought revenge, wanting to prove to his mother and brother that he can carry on his family's name. Ammar had done the unthinkable. Joining the rebel forces was certain to lead to death. Training provided by the U.S. left him prepared, physically ready for the war. But training could not prepare him emotionally. The death, the brutality, deteriorating hours of it was never ending. Fighting ISIS was his main goal, but Ammar didn't realize all of the hardships that would follow.
Ammar's world has officially been turned upside down. Every aspect of his life has been affected by Assad and his reckless decisions. Time has passed and he finds his home country involved in many other conflicts rather than just between Assad and the rebels. Russia has been backing up Assad and is helping to provide money, weapons, and assisting on airstrikes. The rebel group is attempting to protect original Syrian life but is opposing many enemies, like the Kurds' belief, which is giving them reason to wreak terror upon homes. Syria is now a living hell and Ammar has simply turned into a casualty.
Ammar was sick, beaten down, and mentally drained. He often asks himself if this is what his mother and brother would truly want from him. Ammar has thoughts of a better life for himself anywhere other than here. He envisions a home, white picket fence, with his family living inside. When would this dream finally become his reality? This was his chance. It was late at night, and the rest of his crew had fallen asleep. Ammar hadn't come up with a plan, but anything was better than here. As he wanders the streets with nothing but a weapon in his hand, a car approaches out of the corner of his eye. It's an unfamiliar face, and Ammar's first reaction is to clench the gun in his palms. The window slowly rolls down, and a friendly voice calms the tension in the air. Need a ride? I'm heading to the airport, and I could use some company. Ammar was hesitant at first, but this was his shot, so he dropped his gun and got into the car. Hours have passed, and the airport was approaching. Conversation was little. The driver informed Ammar that she was a journalist from the U.S., staying in Syria with hopes of developing a world-famous story. As talk begins to fade, the airport is now in Ammar's reach. They enter the building, and all eyes are immediately drawn to Ammar. As they approach security, Ammar is stopped. He knew this was the end for him. Ammar's dreams were unfortunately never a reality for him. The U.S. President Donald Trump had made it impossible for someone like Ammar to get in. After death, violence, war after war, the travel ban was the only thing that had truly stopped him.